I'm hoping someone can help me. I'm having trouble putting this all down, and hopefully you'll understand why I need someone to call me as soon as possible. You see, it started about a week ago, just after finishing another late shift. I was planning on driving down my usual route back home. Sadly, the whole road was closed due to roadworks, which meant I had to take the longer country road back. After pulling my frustrated face off my steering wheel, thinking about the 45 minutes of sleep I was actively losing, I turned around to drive through the quiet back roads. While the streetlights faded behind me in the rear view, all I could do was curse under my breath about all the small inconveniences in my bubble that seemed to line up perfectly today. My crappy boss that saw me on the way out the door stopped me to ask, "Could you stay a little longer? We need to finish our presentation for the board." It'd mean the world to me. While he put on his coat, patting me on the back before adding a thanks by, "You're the best." I'd like to think this was an out-of-the-blue type of day. Honestly, this was becoming more typical with each passing week. I remember thinking about quitting, then running through the whole interview process again with other companies, along with all the other headaches that come with searching for a new job, so I quickly shut the idea down. So, 20 minutes into my detour, as the clock struck midnight, the radio that was blaring to keep myself awake turned to static, eating away at my music until all that was left was a chipper voice breaking through to announce himself. Good evening to all you lovely listeners, and welcome back to Midnight Radio. It's me, the host, back again to bring all the joy of a late night show. What the hell? I muttered, thinking I'd probably picked up a signal from some independent station. This didn't stop me from attempting to switch my own music back on before giving up a few attempts later. Rather than risk driving into the nearest tree, I kept the host on while I continued on my drive. As I approached my driveway, I found myself enjoying the show more. There was new music from bands like Tall Man with the Backbone, $6 Sunglasses, and Jim Jones' Retirement Plan. It was almost 1 o'clock when the host came back on after Tall Man's latest hit Don't Go Looking for My Face finished playing before closing out with, "Well, listeners, we've come to the end. We'll be back tomorrow night with a few new additions to our little radio show, so be sure to tune in. I hope you have a good rest of your night because sometimes it might just be your last. Good night, folks." With that ominous last sentence, the strange broadcast ended, leaving me in the static, sitting idle in my driveway. Feeling a lot more relaxed, I sank into my bed, set my alarm for work, then let myself drift off. The next day, I get into work a little later than I planned after sleeping in past my alarm. My boss decided to make a big joke with a fat grin on his face when I walked through the door. Well, look who decided to show up. Maybe lay off the drinking on a work night, at champ. 15 minutes, by the way. I was late by 15 goddamn minutes after doing his overdue work, and I got alive at the Apollo stand-up routine. I centered myself, letting all the awful things that I could do to him fade from my mind. My body's tense muscles loosen as I take a deep breath. You're right. Ha. Anyway, we've got that big presentation coming up. Let's get in there. Yeah, I hate myself too. We walked in to see the heads of the other departments all gathered to hear our new finance plan to help turn this company around. I'm not gonna leave any details here because, Well, I don't want people to find out where I work, and second, this is all incredibly boring. The point is, I did all the work. So when this guy, at the beginning of this presentation that I worked on for weeks, decides he is more qualified to present this to the others than I am, while introducing it like he did all the work to show off, I make a fuss. I stand up for myself. I tell him I'm the guy who did it, while all he did was sneak a greasy bag of food into his office to eat. He thinks he is slick, but we can hear him gorging inside that wet slop-filled box of his. After getting some of this out of my system, letting the red mist leave my body, I realize I'm standing there with the other bosses of the company who are now convinced their fellow boss has brought a screaming madman into the workplace. To top it all off, after I'm done mouthing off, all he does is put his sweaty palm on my shoulder, while saying, "Why don't you go home for the day?" The expression on my face clearly didn't help people's feelings towards me at that current moment, so without further comment, I slowly walked back out of the room, listening to his voice irritating me further about how sorry he is for my outburst and to just move on with his presentation. Grinding my teeth all the way home, walking through my door before flopping my entire body onto my couch. I decide then and there, after today's final straw, I will be quitting in the morning. Until that happens, I'm gonna drown myself in my feelings. Grabbing the remote, I stick on a movie I've seen 100 times over while trying to imagine what it would be like if I never had to work ever again. A few hours passed by before my phone started pinging with notifications from the workgroup chat. For the first couple of pings, I ignored them, but when they piled up to the point where I thought my phone was going to explode, I relented, picked up my phone to see our whole office going out after work to a bar with pictures of what looked like the best night of this year. People were ecstatic because our boss did a stellar performance, so much so that they all got together and organized an impromptu party to celebrate. Looking up from my phone, eyeing the bottle of Jack that had been waiting for me ever since I walked through the door. I give up. Well, I might as well play the part of the office drunk. After an hour and half a bottle later, I was 3 sheets to the wind. If you had walked past my house to listen, you'd think you'd have heard a great get-together happening. It was right in the middle of not my most beautiful moment when the speakers I set up to play bad music from the early 2000s crackled, popped, and screeched static, then swiftly turned into the late-night greeting from the host. Good evening, listeners. Welcome back to Midnight Radio. Tonight we've got a few more new bands lined up for the next hour. There will also be a little treat for some of our newer listeners at the end of the hour. So stay with us while we get settled into the sound of Motorbike Cascade by the Shredders. I jumped out of my seat at the sound of his announcement. I went over to my speakers while checking my phone for any changes. Nothing had changed on my phone. It was still showing that my playlist was still connected to the speakers. I stood there scratching my head, wondering how the hell this radio station began blaring through. But as I said, I was completely drunk at the time and couldn't be bothered to fix the issue. Instead, I decided to sit down to enjoy the next hour or so before resigning myself to pass out on my couch. What followed was music that topped last night's selection by a mile. For the strange names that they were given, I wrote them off as some new indie bands just pushing their stuff out there. More bands came and went with peculiar names until the last 5 minutes of the show, when everything came to a dead stop. Silence. For about 30 seconds, there was nothing, to to the point where I got up to check if my speakers had just given up. As I reached out to turn them on and off again, the host came back in a flash with more of an upbeat tone than before. Well, folks, we're coming up to that special surprise.